today we have a bit of a different video because we're going to be testing out a resin print cleaner. This is an ultrasonic cleaner that was very kindly sent over by Sunlu for me to try out. I'm actually really excited to see how this works because when it comes to resin printing, the cleaning and post-processing tools and machines are equally as important as the printers themselves. Every time you print something, you have to properly clean it and cure it, and there really hasn't been a whole lot in terms of changes or technological advancements in the wash and cure machines the same way that there has been for the 3D printers. The ultrasonic element in this machine is a lot different compared to what the more typical wash and cure machines use, so I'm very interested in seeing how this performs. So I guess let's start opening this up to see what we're working with. This was probably the easiest unboxing I've ever done. The machine itself is in one piece, and the only other parts in the box were the instructions, a pair of tweezers, presumably to help with removing parts from the vat, and the power cord. After removing the outer plastic wrapping, we can see our first good look at the machine itself. It opens from the top, and inside is an open vat that on the backside has indication lines for minimum and maximum liquid levels. Now this machine apparently works best with actual resin detergent, but as I've never used that, I'm just going with my usual 99% isopropyl alcohol so that I would have a direct comparison with what I'm used to using. I ended up using 4 500ml bottles of isopropyl alcohol, so 2 liters, and that filled it up just below the maximum fill line. Once you filled up the machine with your desired cleaning solution, all that's left is to plug in the power cord and turn it on. I have to say, the lights in the Sunlu logo are a very nice touch. On the top of the machine you have the time and power display, so you have plus and minus time buttons, and then the power levels which control the intensity of the ultrasonic waves, and the knob can be turned to even further adjust the specific timing that you want this machine to be operating. Now it just so happened that I had some of my maker coins laying around that needed to be cleaned, and I would without a doubt consider these the absolute worst resin prints that I've ever had to clean. And even worse, I constantly am having to make them, so it is a constant nuisance in my life trying to get these coins cleaned. They have an insane amount of detail on both sides, and the resin just absolutely loves staying within the recessed areas, which makes these probably the absolute perfect test for this machine. I started off with running the machine at the first power level just to sort of gauge exactly what this was going to do to the prints. I unceremoniously dropped a couple of coins into the bottom of the vat, and you can see the bubble action going on here, and also the resin that's being removed from the coins gathering at the bottom of the vat. Once the machine had finished going through its 4-minute cleaning cycle that I set it at, I grabbed my trusty pair of tongs that I use all of the time for cleaning resin prints to help me grab these out of the bottom. It's really not that deep. I could very easily grab it with my hands. The tongs are mostly just for convenience, and this is what the coins look like straight out of the machine. I did blot them off a little with a paper towel to get rid of some of the excess alcohol, and I have to say these were looking pretty good. You can see the extra resin that was left over in the bottom of the vat, so this time around I decided to try standing the coins up to see if that would make any difference with the cleaning process, because, you know, putting the coins back in resin filth didn't seem like a great idea, and I also decided to up the power level to 3 to see how that went. The coins do have a couple of really small detailed areas that can be pretty delicate, so I wanted to see if power level 3 would be too intense for these. It did make a super awesome texture on the surface of the alcohol, very mesmerizing to watch. And once that cleaning cycle was over, did the same thing as the first time, removed the coins with my tongs, blotted them off with some paper towel, and this is what they looked like. At this point I wasn't sure if they really looked much cleaner, but at the very least it didn't look like it damaged any of the parts, so I decided to stick with the power 3 level just because I figured the cleaner the better. This next time around I decided to put more coins in the vat to see if that made any difference with the cleanliness of each coin. You can see here we're back to the bubbling action, and you can actually see the bubbles removing the resin off of the surface of the coins, which is pretty cool to watch. Again, removed them with my tongs and then blotted them off to take a look at this, and at this point I really couldn't tell, but when I cured these later there were ones that seemed a lot cleaner than others. This particular one I'm pretty sure was done with the first power level, so that's obviously not intense enough for these coins. But most of them turned out great, which is awesome considering I used to have to hand scrub all of these. But of course we can't just stop there for the tests, so I got a couple of my printers up and running on some projects to see how they'd clean up in this machine as well. First up, we've got 1/12 scale Boss Nass. Now he has some really amazing fine detail that I thought would be the perfect test to see how well this machine can do at removing the excess resin from all of those really small crevices. And just to mention, from now on, I kept everything at power level 3 and cleaned everything for 4 minutes. And I have to say, Mr. Nass was looking pretty fresh, squeaky clean, dare I say, straight from an Otagunga spa. No, but really, he was looking great, and being able to see all of this fine detail without that extra layer of resin was really cool. Next up, we have these Night Sister orbs. These have been on my to print list forever, and they have so much fine recessed detail on them that I thought they would make the perfect test for this machine. They're also hollowed out, which is why you saw me just have to shove them under the alcohol so that they would sink. There are 3 in total as part of the set, so I decided to put 2 in the vat at once and then do 1 separately to see if that made any difference in terms of cleanliness for these parts, which, spoiler alert, really didn't make a difference, at least one that I could tell. Obviously, the 2 in the vat at once, they were not too close together, so the resin was very easily removed from the surface of the part. You can see here with them all dried off and their supports removed. I know one of these was from each batch, although I can't remember which one because, like I said, there really wasn't a noticeable difference in cleanliness between them. They both cleaned up amazing. Next up for the models to try cleaning, we have a couple of Trade Federation guys.
This is getting out of hand. Now there are 2 of them.
I'm sorry, I had to, but first up into the washing machine is Newt Gunray. This is another 1/12 scale figure, again hollowed out, and on top of just wanting to test multiple different types of prints in this machine, ones with varying degrees of detail, I also wanted to see how the machine performed as the alcohol continues to get more and more resin laden and dirtier, and see if it would still clean prints well. And for these guys, they still were cleaning off really awesome. Eventually you could start to barely see the bottom of the vat for how much resin started to be in this IPA. Obviously there will be a point where the alcohol becomes so resin laden that it will pretty much be ineffective and just make like a sticky mess on the prints, but I'm happy to say that this machine still works well even when the alcohol starts to have a bit of resin in it. From there, I really wanted to try cleaning something more delicate, but obviously still something that I would be interested in printing, so I reprinted this Wada, which I feel like has made an appearance in another video, but that was actually a failed print. And other than him being quite delicate on his own, he has these incredibly small and fragile accessories. I think this is a bag, but I have no clue how I didn't just fully break those straps off at any point during the filming of this. But thankfully I didn't, so into the cleaner they all go. Again, of course, still kept it on that 3rd and strongest power level, and I'm happy to say that everything survived this cleaning process. It all looked incredible, even that insanely delicate little bag. At this point, I think we can all agree that this machine seems to work great on more delicate and detailed parts, but what about larger, chunkier pieces? I printed Plo Koon's lightsaber because lightsabers tend to give a wide range of different size and types of parts. For instance, these were all of the detailed pieces, which I left as the solid sheet to see if it would still be cleaned efficiently. Here's what it looked like all dried off, and I was pleasantly surprised that everything seemed to have cleaned really well. Next was this ridged piece that had a ton of little supports that I had to use for it to print successfully. And of course, with all of those little supports means there's lots of areas for resin to stay stuck to. But again, this looked like it cleaned up really well. This group of rings I left together again as a bit of a test to see if the machine could efficiently clean this group of pieces with them being condensed so close together. These rings were completely flat, so it's not like they had any recessed areas where resin could really build up, but I was happy to see that even the most central ring of the group cleaned up really nicely. There were quite a few other pieces that made up this lightsaber, but there really wasn't anything specific to note about them. All of them cleaned up really well except for this last one, but this was a solid piece and it just ended up printing with that resin gunk that can sometimes form on more solid pieces, but this should really be classified as more of a printing error on my part. And here's what all of the resin lightsaber pieces look like put together to actually form Plo Koon's lightsaber. I wanted to wrap this video up by giving you my final thoughts on this machine now that I've had the chance to use it for the last week on all of my resin projects. Overall, it was a really positive experience. This cleaner definitely does what it's supposed to do. All of these prints are super clean, no complaints from me. I obviously tried to give it a variety of different types of prints from what I would typically be using it for, as well as what other people might be looking at using this machine for. So while I don't typically do a lot of really small fine detail parts, I did print that Watto because I knew it had those really breakable little pieces and accessories, and just the Watto in general is quite delicate. You know, his little legs could very easily get caught in a more traditional basket cleaner situation, and this worked great on all of those really delicate parts. I still wanted to try it on chunkier parts, which is why I printed this Plo Koon lightsaber, and all of these parts cleaned up really nicely as well. I do think that the main benefit for this machine though is if you're somebody that is printing really finely detailed and delicate pieces. Not that it can't work for larger pieces, but how the ultrasonic movement and just how this machine works, it does a really good job at cleaning everything, but it is especially good for parts that would probably break in a more traditional wash and cure station. And even if you're printing something that's not particularly delicate, but does have a lot of detail and recessed areas like the coins that I of course started with and these Night Sister orbs, it seemed to have cleaned out all of the resin in the recessed areas. Like, these things are perfectly clean. All of these pieces now are cured, but even before these were cured, it didn't look like there was any resin residue left in any of the small cracks and crevices, which is pretty impressive because especially on these orbs, there is quite deep recessed areas that I would assume probably resin would pretty easily gather just from the printing process and would not necessarily be very easily removed, but it came out of everything. There's nowhere on this now that looks like extra resin cured in any of the cracks and details. And of course, all of these parts were done in the Sunlu ABS-like resin in black or dark gray. There's some color variance between Boss Nass and then the Trade Federation guys, just because I had some black left over in the resin vat, so it kind of mixed in and made this slightly darker gray. The lightsaber is pretty dead on of what the dark gray resin looks like. I will also say that the ABS-like resin printed these finer detailed parts really nicely as well. I feel like at some point there was a myth going around that ABS-like resin wouldn't hold the same detail that like a standard resin or even a higher 8K resin and all of those ones and print at, but all of the like robe texture and everything on these printed beautifully. The one thing that I'm slightly concerned about with this machine is removing the liquid from it eventually. I never changed the alcohol out from this week. It was seemingly cleaning everything fine. It definitely is cloudier now. Like, you pretty much can't see the bottom of the machine anymore, but everything was still coming out really clean, so I didn't change it out. But when I do need to, there's obviously that sticker in the front that says pour like this way, which makes sense since like all of the electronics and stuff are in the back. Gonna need to be like a fast and quick pour. I do think that when I do go to change out the alcohol in this, that I might use one of the big syringes that I have to more easily remove resin from vats. That way I could lower the liquid level so it's not so heavy and like so much liquid in this machine that I then have to dump out and like try not to get all over the place. Past that initial first test, I never took this machine off of the third and strongest power. It does seem to work the best for removing the resin off of the prints, and I didn't find it too strong ever that it was damaging anything, so I just left it. I also really like that this saves the like last settings that you use, so I pretty much all of the time do 4 minutes and then of course kept that third power level, and once the machine had stopped like the current job, it automatically sets it back to 4 minutes, that you could then just in theory remove the part that's in the machine, put the next one in, and then press start without having to like fiddle with the dial, change the timing on it. So that was really convenient, and I wish that other wash and cure machines had that it would like revert to the time that you set it at, so you could literally just press one button instead of constantly having to change the timing. And as far as the size of this machine goes, I would say that this would probably fit about 90% of the things that I print. Even for larger props like this lightsaber, you pretty much never have something that is a solid piece, and the individual parts that make up a larger prop like this have more than enough room to fit in this machine. Technically, because this machine doesn't doesn't lock itself down in any way, and you can use it with the top open. If there was any parts that were too large to fit in it, you could, in theory, like clean one half of it at a time and have like the other half sticking out and then swap it. Because I know some like larger statue parts maybe wouldn't fit in this depending on how the statue's like broken down, because I could definitely see this machine being of interest to people that print statues, and again, just anything with more refined detail that the resin just really seems to like sticking into all of those small minute little areas. I do actually like that this machine isn't super massive, because it means you're not having to use like a ton of alcohol or any other resin detergent at one point. When I go to have to change the alcohol in my other wash and cure machines, I'm literally using like 8 to 10 bottles at once. I did find that not overfilling the vat with too many parts cleaned things a lot better. It's not like you can only put like one small piece in this at a time. It's just, you know, make sure that your parts have a decent amount of space around them. It's important that this machine cleans your parts well and not that you're doing it in like record time. It's not personally my thing, but I can only imagine how useful a machine like this would be if you're somebody printing a lot of tabletop miniatures and smaller scale figures like that. Like, I've seen the small little breakable details that a lot of those figures have, you know, between swords and just super fine parts because of the scale of the pieces. And I can only imagine how much of a nightmare that must be to normally clean. So I guess if you're sick of breaking your swords off of your figures during your washing process, then this might be for you. I know I've gone on a lot about the benefit of this with the smaller and more delicate detailed parts, but it did still do a really awesome job at cleaning the bigger pieces. I just think that with this machine, where it really shines is with those delicate pieces that would typically be very difficult to clean properly without risking damage to the print itself. Massive thank you again to Sunlu for sending over this machine. Of course, if you have any other questions about this machine or any of these print projects that I maybe didn't expand upon enough in this video, then please feel free to leave those in the comments. But that is everything. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.